Stewart here, and I am going to teach you everything you need to know about FCPX in 20 minutes. Between us, Alina and I have edited hundreds of wedding videos, music videos, corporate videos, YouTube videos on Final Cut Pro, and we love it as a platform. It really is very good, but it's expensive and there's pro level functionality in there like multicam editing that you might not need or might not think is worth paying up for. So if that's you, do check out the link in our description to our free ebook, a purchasing guide for video editing software. We run through a whole bunch of features explaining them so you can understand what you need or what you want, and you can compare that against a purchasing table so you can see the features of all the different software. There's a couple of recommendations in there, do check it out. Anyway, this video is about Final Cut Pro X, Final Cut Pro 10. This is going to be intense, it's going to be fast, you might need to pause, you might need to take notes. This is professional software, so I've assumed a little bit of familiarity, at least with the process of opening documents and using your computer and so on and so forth. So we're going to get into this. Pause if you need to. Let's do it. Right, let's get into this. File, new library. Let's call this drone film, shall we? Within our libraries we have events and projects. Events are groupings of projects. We don't really need them unless we are dealing with enormous edits. So let's work at the project level. We'll rename the event drone film and let's import some media. Locate where you've saved your files. This will just have the same structure as you've created in Finder. Select those files, and on the right hand side I want to bring your attention to two things. First up, we want to leave the files in place. There's no need to create duplicates, it just uses up hard drive space. Second of all, we're going to create keywords from the folder structure that we've already created in Finder. You'll see the relevance of this in a second. If you click the little down arrow next to the drone film event, you'll see audio and video with little keys next to them. Those are the keywords that we've created. Because we opted to set our keywords from our folder structure, those keywords correspond with the folders that we've set up in Finder when we imported the media. I know this sounds really boring and you want to get editing straight away, but I strongly recommend organising your media in folders in Finder first to give us a fighting chance when we import it into Final Cut. Speaking of organisation, let's click the drop down arrow next to Smart Collections and you'll see we have ways of itemising our media by all video, audio only, favourites, projects and stills. Let's create our first project. File, new project. In the dialog box we'll give a project name, let's call it part 1, and you'll see it sits within the event drone film. We have some video settings we can adjust, 4K 25 frames per second, adjust as you wish, and 99.9% of the time the standard audio settings will be fine. Excellent. You can see that we now have a timeline in the bottom half of Final Cut, but before we get into that, let's take a look at the footage we imported in the browser window. Select the video keywords and you'll see with the first file there, if we just hover the mouse over the image that comes up, we can skim through the file and look for the bits that we want. It's a very quick and easy and intuitive way of looking through your video files. I want you to learn some keyboard shortcuts even at this early stage in the process. Spacebar stops and starts playback. You're going to use that all the time, but we can go one better than that. Press L for forward playback, press K to stop the playback, and press J for reverse playback. Coincidentally, all three keys are right next to each other on the keyboard, so by combining your skimming with J, K and L, you can quickly navigate through all your footage and find out what parts you want to keep and use in your edit. Quick tip, if you double press or triple press J or L, it will play back at double or triple speed. Click on this little icon at the top to toggle between film strip and list mode. We're now in film strip mode. It's a visual depiction of the clips that you have imported. It can be a very useful way of doing things. I tend to operate in list mode, but it is entirely up to you. We can also resize our windows, so if you're doing editing up here in the browser window, you give yourself a little bit more space to skim through your footage. Now, I don't want to only show you what buttons to press in Final Cut Pro, I want to make you a better editor, so let's take a look at what a lot of people would do at this stage in the process. You found a clip you like up in the browser window, why don't you select that, pull it down into the timeline with the mouse. Select a few more, pull them all down, just have a good skim through. It is very intuitive at the end of the day just to look through your creation. You can change the length of the clips just by pulling the clips in and out from the sides. It's very easy to do. Rearrange them as well, just drag them from A to B, and before you know it, you're starting to create your edit. Now this approach works great if you're working with a small number of curated clips like I'm demonstrating here. By all means, go for it. But if you're editing a wedding, a conference, a music video, something with loads of angles, loads of clips, this approach is going to get out of hand very, very quickly. So let's look at a smarter way. Here we have a 6-minute clip of Alina walking around the Scottish Highlands. We're skimming through the clip using the trackpad because we can, it's super fast, super efficient, and we can see there are lots of little pieces in here that we might want to use, but they're all within the 6-minute clip. One option would be to select the individual pieces, drag them down onto the timeline, and then we have a bunch of clips that we can play around with in our edit, but that's still not the best way of doing things. Let's skim forward to the first piece that we think might be interesting. This looks good. Okay, I think we'll go with this. So let's press I for in point. And look at the little yellow bracket that appeared up there in the film strip. Press L for forward playback. We'll continue to the end of our select, K to stop, and let's press O for our out point. And look at the closed bracket there up on the film strip. This is where the magic happens, so if this is the only thing you take away from this video, I am happy. Our chosen clip trapped between our in and out points, as depicted on our film strip by those yellow brackets, is our select. Press F to favourite it, you'll see a little green marker appear between those brackets. We can now refer back to that little clip at a later date, plucking it out of that broader 6-minute clip. Let's favourite some more clips and then I'll show you how to find all those favourites, getting rid of the bits that we've just discarded. As you can see here, we continue to work our way through the 6-minute clip looking for little bits that we like, pressing I for in point, O for out point and F to favourite. Go up to that drop down where it currently says hide rejected, click on that and scroll down to favourites. Check this out, it's amazing. That big 6-minute clip has now been broken down into the favourite component parts. This is the selection of clips from which you will edit in future, not the previous 6-minute clip. You can now tap into those clips as and when you wish. The work has all been done now. We've not cluttered up our browser with loads of bits of unwanted clips. We have a lovely directory of selects that we can use to build our edit. This is editing in Final Cut Pro X. Please don't think that you're wasting your time because you've not pulled everything down onto your timeline. This will save you so much time, especially if you're getting into bigger creative edits where you need a little bit of time just to ponder your next move. Being able to see all those selects up there ready for use there's just no comparison between this approach and the previous approach. The one time I would use the old approach for editing and drag the whole clip down into the timeline is if I was editing a YouTube video. In this instance, I'm relying on looking at the waveform for identifying where I want to make my cuts, finding where I've captured audio. I'm looking for the bits that I just want to chuck away because obviously there's a lot of repetition, a lot of mistakes. Skimming through using the waveform as a guide. It's easier to do that down on the timeline than it is up in the browser window. When you find a piece that you want to chop out, press Command B, that cuts the clip, and just press backspace to delete the selected element that you no longer want. You can of course still drag in from the sides of the clips as well to shorten clips. It's not always as precise. I think Command B can work a little bit better. And so it continues, you just skim through. The key feature here is that we're dealing with a linear edit. We're not anticipating shuffling all these chunks of the clips. We've just got a 30-minute recording. We want to cut out all the nonsense and everything else stays in place. We've got a lot more to talk about obviously, but I do get excited about matters of workflow and productivity. Yes, I'm a little bit sad like that, but I hope you can embrace some of that and apply it to your own projects. Okay, let's crack on. A function that you're going to use all the time is Command plus or Command minus to zoom in and zoom out of your timeline. Obviously, if you want to make accurate cuts, you need to zoom in, but if you want to see your whole project for an overview, you want to zoom out. The up and down arrow keys help us navigate to the starting point of each clip, and if we want to make fine-tune adjustments, pressing left and right on the arrow keys moves the playhead forwards and backwards by 1 frame at a time. Let's build out our edit now, so let's select our favourites, and we're going to use some of these nice clips that we've chosen already as B-roll for our YouTube film. Let's click on the first clip, and after skimming through it, we decide that we want to drag it down onto our timeline, so click on it and pull it down and position it as you wish. If you position it on top of the primary storyline, then it functions as B-roll, playing over the top of the talking head shot of me. When we play through the timeline, we see what is uppermost at any point in time. The shortcut for this particular kind of edit is Q. Moving on to the next clip, let's say we wanted to place it between two clips on the primary storyline. We press W, and as you can see, it inserts it in between those two clips. After you've done that, you can reposition as you wish. The mouse or trackpad is useful in this respect, and in this instance you can see we're dragging out of the primary storyline back up to the B-roll sequence that we've created. You can move those clips around and trim them, but you'll notice that they're not stuck together. The primary storyline down below is magnetic, but the B-roll secondary storyline is not. If you want those clips to be stuck together because you're creating a nice sequence, then select them and press Alt-G, and you can see that we now have a little magnetic storyline above the primary storyline. Let's build out our edit now by dropping some clips down. We've put the playhead at the start, we select a clip and press W to drop it down. We just drag the sides in, we'll pull another one down, or we'll press W in this instance, and you can see how quickly and efficiently you can start to build your edit inside FCPX. We'll do the same at the end of the sequence, so rather than drag a clip down to the end, let's select our clip and press E. That's the shortcut to append a clip to the end of the primary storyline, something that you will use quite often, I should imagine. I know I'm throwing a lot of shortcuts at you, so please don't be put off. I just want to open your eyes to the efficiency gains that can be had by learning these keystrokes. Let's get a couple more workflow issues dealt with, and then we can get on with the fun stuff like color grading, effects, transitions, and all those kind of things. When you're stacking layers, sometimes you want to see what's underneath your B-roll without necessarily deleting that clip. If we press V, it grays it out and switches it off, and you can see the talking head that lies underneath. Of course, press V to switch it back on. As you've seen, Final Cut works around a magnetic timeline system, so when you pull a clip down onto the timeline, everything else gets shoved to the side to make space for it. Now that might not be what you're used to, or you might not want that approach, so there are ways around that, and I'll show you that now. Let's say we want to break up this clip with a little segment of another clip in the middle. Well, we could press Q to drop the clip down on top, that kind of B-roll approach, but it might not be what you want. So instead press D and it will drop the clip right down. As you can see, the clip gets split in two, it doesn't get pushed to the side. Personally, I'm more inclined to use Q and build the timeline upwards. We can always, at the end of the project, consolidate it all the way back down, but I find it easier to see the component parts moving upwards, just a personal preference. Finally, when we drag clips to crop them, the rest of the timeline moves with us. Now, if we're doing a music video where timings are very, very important, we don't want that to happen. We want the rest of the clips to be left in place. Press P and we'll see the arrow change to a different kind of arrow. Now when we drag the end of a clip to crop it, rather than pulling the whole timeline with us, it creates a spacer. If you're more used to organising your timeline in this way, you can see it's very easy to do on Final Cut. Press A to switch back to the standard arrow for use on your magnetic timeline. Normally it's nice to fade into our videos, so let's head over to the transition browser, click on that, and you can see all the transitions. Type fade into the search box, up comes fade to colour. Drag that onto the clip at the start, and as you can see, when we press play, the clip fades in from black. We don't always want these harsh hard cuts in between our clips, so let's drag on a cross dissolve, and when we press play you can see that we dissolve between the two shots. Like most editing software, Final Cut has a whole bunch of exciting colourful transitions, but I would suggest initially at least you confine yourself to these two transitions. If you want to change the length of a transition, grab the side of it and stretch it out. Watch this now, big dreamy cross dissolve taking place over a few seconds. What if you want to change the length of the underlying clip, but you can't get at it because there's now a transition in the way? Well, do you see the two little bars at the top corners of the transition? Instead of clicking the side of the transition, click on the bars and pull the clip to the left or the right, and that adjusts the length of the underlying clip, leaving the transition as is. Next to the transitions browser, we have the effects browser, and here you can scroll through all manner of effects that we can apply to our video footage here in Final Cut. Take camcorder as an example. Click on that, and this is where Final Cut is really cool. We don't actually have to apply the effect to see what it looks like on the clip. Just scrub over the effect in the effects browser and we can see the effect that it has. Makes it very easy to browse through and see the impact of different effects on your clips. To apply an effect to a clip, simply drag it onto the clip, or with the clip selected, double click on the effect and it will add it. You can then view the effect and change its parameters up in the video inspector. Speaking of which, let's head on up there right now to the video inspector and see what other manipulations we can make to our clips. With the clip selected as defined by the yellow box around the perimeter of the clip, we can control a whole bunch of parameters up in the video inspector. Opacity controls the transparency of the clip, and if you slide it down you start to see what's underneath the clip. Normally it will be at 100%. In the transform section we have the scale, so we can zoom in and zoom out. Reset each individual parameter by clicking that little curvy arrow. We can rotate the clip, again reset that. Normally it'll be at 0, but that's good for adjusting squinty horizons on drone footage, for example. Transform, we can move the clip to the left or right, up or down on the X and Y axis. If we scroll down to crop, then we can cut the frame for some split screens, for example. Distort, this allows us to twist the frame and manipulate it. I have to say I don't really use that very often. Stabilization is great for post-production stabilization on shaky footage. It can work very effectively. Rolling shutter allows us to remove some rolling shutter effects. That's quite an advanced function. And spatial conform allows us to stretch the clip to fit the timeline. Click on the triangle next to the film strip and you will see the color inspector. Exposure, saturation and color. We can adjust the highlights, midtones and shadows in each of those. It's a big topic, but let's just give a quick demonstration on this YouTube talking headshot. Press Ctrl Command 1 to get rid of the events browser and Command 7 to bring up the waveform. With reference to that waveform, let's raise the highlights a little bit, bring the shadows down, add some contrast to that image. We can add a little bit of saturation, make those colours a little bit more vivid. In the colour panel we can remove blue or we can add blue. It depends on your taste. As I say, it's a very advanced subject, but it's a great demonstration of how behind the surface of Final Cut it really is professional level software. Here we've selected the colour of the backdrop on the hue versus hue curve, and if we stretch that out we can make colour adjustments just to that background. Behind this user-friendly interface in Final Cut we have some real power at our disposal here. To delete any of those effects, go back to the video inspector, select the effect in question and press backspace. Okay, that was intense. We have more in-depth colour grading tuition here on the channel, but for now, let's take a deep breath and let's go deeper. Copying and pasting clips is a simple case of selecting the clip, pressing Command C, moving the playhead to where you want it to go and pressing Command V. Now what if you only wanted to copy and paste the effects from one clip across other clips in your project? With the source clip selected, press Command-Shift-C. Select the target clip, press Command-Shift-V, and up comes a menu of effects that you can then paste across onto the target clip. Assuming your selected clip has an audio track, if you click on the little speaker, it opens up the audio inspector. Here you can adjust the volume of the audio track as you would expect. We also have audio enhancements, like the graphic equalizer, so if we click on that little logo there, up it comes. We've got some presets that we can play with, flat, voice enhance, so on and so forth. If you've recorded the track too quietly, then we have an enhancement called loudness, where you can increase the volume of the track without necessarily increasing the noise and hiss within it. If you do have background noise in your track, then we also have noise removal. You can try hum removal as well. And we can also pan the audio from left to right. In the effects browser we also have loads of audio effects that we can play around with. It's a real strength of Final Cut here to have so much power on the audio side of things as well. You'll recall at the time of import that we imported an audio folder. Well, in that audio folder we have this song that we want to add to our edit, so let's drag it down onto the timeline. And again, up in the audio inspector we can adjust the volume of the track. Now if we look on the timeline, look at that line running through the audio track. We can grab on that and pull it up and down to adjust the volume. Audio tracks don't always have a smooth fade in, so look at that little teardrop at the start of the track. Grab on that and pull it into the right, and that gives us a nice fade in. We can even right click on that teardrop and it gives us a selection of fade in profiles that you can play around with. If we only want to turn down a portion of the track, then hold down Alt and click on the volume line in that track. It will add a keyframe. Add another one a little bit further along and then grab the volume and pull it down, and you'll see we have a nice smooth decline in volume between those two keyframes. Final Cut comes with some of its own tracks and sound effects. If we click on the little icon I'm showing you up there, then we can sort all of that by jingles, for example, and we have some short songs and some long songs that we can play with depending on your needs. We can go back and look for some sound effects as well, and this is just a great way of adding texture to your edits. Often you'll want to add a title to your work. So if we click on that little icon, it brings up the title sidebar. Now, a bit like your transitions, less is more. Final Cut gives us a whole bunch of options here. So for the sake of demonstration, let's pick one of these fairly glossy, three-dimensional ones. Simply drag it down on top of your timeline, and much like any other clip, just pull in the sides of it to adjust the length of it. If you click on it, then we can control all manner of parameters. We can change what it says, of course. You can adjust the font, the size of it, add a drop shadow, so on and so forth. If we play it, you see that it comes in, it rotates, actually looks quite good, and then the film continues. If in doubt, I would suggest just picking a standard custom title, pick a nice font, resize it, drag it into the center, looks quite good. Now if you want that title to fade in and fade out, just select the title and add some cross dissolves, again the same way you would with a standard video clip. If we play, we fade in, the title fades in, fades out, cross dissolve into the next clip. I think the whole thing's starting to look quite smart. When you're finished, exporting is simple. Go to File, Share, Apple Devices, 4K. Here you can actually scrub over this little window to see the project that you're exporting, which I think is quite fun. We can add in some description, creator, and tag information. And if we go to settings, we can change the encode speed. So H.264 is the standard encode quality, but you have faster encode and better quality. You can adjust the resolution if you want to. I would leave that at 4K here. And then when you click next, you can select your export destination and you are done. Stop the clock. How did we do? Did we get it all done in 20 minutes? Or maybe it's 21 minutes or 22 minutes. I didn't just want to show you how to press all the buttons. I wanted to give you a little bit of an insight into how to structure your projects. If, like me, editing consumes an enormous amount of your life, then anything that you can do to improve your productivity is just massive. With that in mind, please in the comments below, do leave any suggestions for shortcuts or workflow improvements, tips and techniques that you employ with Final Cut Pro. Also, don't forget to grab yourself a copy of that ebook in the description, especially if you've not already committed to an editing platform. As I say, Final Cut Pro is quite expensive in the grand scheme of things, and it might not be the right system for you. Get an understanding of what editing software can offer you, and then see if there's another piece of software that might be a little bit easier or more accessible. There's no right or wrong, and most importantly, editing is just a means to an end. It's a way of assembling the content that you've already created. The most important thing is to be able to capture your footage correctly. No amount of editing is going to save bad filming, so do hone your craft before you get too bogged down in the editing. It's what you do with it that counts. So we could edit beautiful, advanced pieces of work on cheap, free software. To be honest with you, having a good piece of software or an expensive piece of software does not make you a better editor, in the same way that having an expensive camera does not make you a better camera operator. Anyway, it's been a pleasure talking to you as always. Stay tuned for more editing content, and we will see you next time.